Lord, I just pray, Father, that you would be present with us as we just talk about discernment, as we talk about intimacy with you. Lord, just be the source of everything and all discernment for us tonight and going forward. In Jesus' name, amen. Awesome. So, has anyone here ever made a choice that left you disappointed?
Yeah.
Me too. I've made a lot of bad choices too, so you're in good company. And Ignatius of Loyola, who will be mentioned several times here tonight, he made a lot of mistakes too before he started the Jesuit Jesuit order. So you're in good company for making mistakes. And I want to start with this, which is a little bit outside of what I'm about to talk about with the 4 phases of discernment, but also within it. You all have heard me talk about the going on to a monastery for a personal retreat, right? And I did that last week, and that was my first time ever doing that. And so in that time, it was God's invitation to me to actually become a bit closer to him and more intimate than I've ever really allowed him to before. And in that time that we spent together, there was a lot of things that had happened and that he mentioned to me, but there was one thing that I felt like he wanted me to say, that he told me that I wanted to share with you, because I felt like the Holy Spirit was in it, and because I believe that discernment begins with a place of intimacy that we have with God. And so what he told me was, you, David, are the singular point of my passion, my love, and my affection. And I felt like he's bringing me here tonight to also tell you that you are the singular point of his passion, his love, and his affection. The reason that this was profound for me was because I often feel like I have to earn it, that there's something that has to be done. Even within Christian faith, I feel like I have to bear fruit, right? Bear good fruit, make a disciple, evangelize. There's something that always needs to be done. So I was a person of doing rather than being in his presence. And so this really did a lot for me in terms of increasing my intimacy with him. And a big part of what I'm talking about tonight is just that this is a place of discernment, is a place where you're in an intimate relationship with God, with Jesus, in such a way where you actually can feel like he doesn't see your blemishes. He doesn't see them because he fell head over heels for you. And that I felt like I was connecting with the groom portion of this. That'll say in the Bible that the church is the bride. Yeah, I think that's very real, and I felt like he wants that kind of intimacy with us. So I just wanted to start there, all right? And so I'm going to go into this assuming that we understand that it's an intimate love relationship with Jesus that sets off great discernment. So in terms of the process of discernment that I'm sharing tonight that comes from Ignatius, I'm pulling a lot of it from a book that you would all be able to get. It's the author is Mark Thibodeau, and the book is called God's Voice Within, The Ignatian Way to Discover God's Will. And what we're looking at tonight is like a 4-phase process of discernment. But the first phase, I go down. Okay, so these are the phases, all right? Get quiet, gather the data, dream the dreams, just tapping into deep desires, and then ponder those dreams. And what we're going to discuss now is the getting quiet part, which I kind of just kicked off by talking about solitude a bit there, right? How do we deal with getting quiet in a life that's moving quickly, that's hectic, right? There's kids to drop off, there's jobs to get done, there's projects to get done, right? But even when we have time, it can be difficult to be quiet. It can be difficult for me to feel comfortable being in silence. It can become just very discomforting. And I think that this was a great quote that Friedrich Nietzsche had said around this. He says, when we are alone and quiet, we fear that something will be whispered into our ear. And for this reason, we hate the quiet and drug ourselves with social media. It's amazing. This quote's probably 130 years old. Now, just to contrast that quote for a second, let's just look at Luke, just a line from Luke. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. What's interesting there to me is just that Nietzsche really, he landed on the discomfort that we all feel, right, as humans. And yet here, so in contrasting that, we got Jesus who's like, I want to go into the wilderness, I want to go there often. And it would seem to me that both Nietzsche and Jesus understood the same thing about the quiet. And I would contend that perhaps what they both understood was that when we're in the quiet, we're not alone. And that that whisper sort of knows us. And we may actually have a fear of being alone. Being known. Even more so than being alone. So you kind of can look at like the distractions that we have, right? You have your iPhone, right? That gives you your social media at all times, right? So even when you have a moment to yourself, you can be distracted, right? And you can go to it, and there's a way in which, I don't know, do any of you actually feel like your authentic self on social media? Yeah, I personally don't. I often feel like I'm projecting something. So I don't mean to be a trick question there. But when we're doing that, when we're posting that, putting that there to grab attention, it may just be that we keep perpetually doing that because it's actually scary to be known. And perhaps it also distracts us from actually entering into silence. Or how often, besides social media, how often you bare your soul to another human, all of it, and just let everything be available. And so what I'm proposing here is this, that being alone in solitude could actually be maybe one of the first times that we experience real vulnerability and real exposure. And the idea here that I'm proposing is just going back to what I was sharing earlier about the monastery experience I had. That God is in that space of quiet, loving, and He wants to be near you, and He desires you, and you're the singular point of His passion. So I want to encourage us, as we're exploring quiet, that it's actually a great space, and it's a great place, where He's going to meet with you, and He's not going to be condemning you, right? Also, God often speaks in whispers, right? It's these subtle statements, and we actually need to quiet down. We need to be in a place of quiet to even catch them. And so without quieting down, we'll miss the movements of these things. So the question then is, how do we cultivate this? How do we enter into a place where we can actually begin having this quiet time? And I would like to say that not all of us are really comfortable with the idea of sitting there for 10 minutes in silence. I'm not. I've struggled with it. And things come up that I want to distract myself, or maybe I just don't like the silence. Again, I'm distracted by an iPhone a lot, so it's hard to just drop it and not give it attention anymore, right? So I'd like to encourage us to start small. It's okay at Keys to Success, that's my wife right there, she was talking about our school a second ago. When we talk to our kids about practice, or the parents about practice, we tell them a few minutes every day is better than trying to do 30 minutes all in one day. It actually, a little bit often helps a lot. So if you even can just do 1 minute, that's fine. It's okay to start small. And just think, hey, I'm going to do a minute this week. Next week, I'll try doing 2 minutes of silence. So starting small is a great thing. Don't be dismayed about just the small steps that you're starting with that. Other things that you can do to help develop this. Also, by the way, I know I'm going in and out of the mic. Is that okay? People are hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I was just saying earlier, practicing and praying in silence a little bit each day. That's one. Finding a consistent time and place that excites you. Gosh, can I say, if all you do is go into your closet, but you don't like closets, or you go into a dark room and you don't like a dark room, it's not going to be good, right? You're going to have a negative connotation with it, so you want to really increase the positive connotations. I'm not a really big morning person. I'm not going to really enjoy trying to sit there for 5 minutes in the morning while I'm just falling half asleep. I should actually choose a time of day that actually does that. So think of that, positive reinforcement that this is a positive experience. The next is working with a spiritual director to help work things out as you're doing the process. I met with a spiritual director just the other day and I talked about my monastery experience. I can't tell you how helpful it is. And I've been talking to this guy for like 3 or 4 years now. I've grown so much through it. But just to have another set of eyes to actually talk me through what I'm experiencing and how I'm conversing with Jesus, and bringing observations and just saying like, oh, I'm hearing you saying this. Oh, what do you think about this when God's saying that? It really does help. And so I can't say enough for that. And then the other is try using a book or a book of prayer, common worship, but something to ignite it, to get it started. Because sometimes it's just tough start, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to sit here in silence. And it's like, well, how do I get it going? Well, I think that anything that you can do to sort of initiate it is great. And for myself, I just play like a little bit of music, and I like that a lot. But tailor it to you, all right? Tailor the experience to you. And lastly, the journaling. Once I get like a flow and God's talking to me, I do like to record it. I like to put it down, type it in, because I don't have to judge it as it's coming in, and I can look at it later and go, oh, was that God, was it not? That's a really important component for anyone who's maybe trying it out for the first time, trying to listen to God's voice. So these are some things to help with the quiet step of this, all right? So now we have 3 more phases of discernment that we're going to be going through. And I'd like to say that these other phases are really there to help you when you're having a situation, when you're trying to figure something out, right? You've been an invitation to move, right? You've got a job that's taking you to India or someplace, and there's several options, and they're going to change the course of your life, and you don't know what to do. So these are actually some fantastic steps I'm really excited to share with you. So the next one, this one, when you're first encountering the process of that, you want to gather data. You just want to get information. All right? And it looks like this. It's really straightforward. Google searches, visiting the people involved, going to the locations that you're thinking about, looking at photos, summaries, ask tons of questions, seek out friends and a support network. This list can keep going on. It's any kind of information that you can get, any resource about those things that you've got to decide between. That's what you're going to do. What's the interesting thing to me about it is that your approach to the information, in the approach to it, it would propose to be very unbiased. It's very easy when you get information about a thing to really like it. You got 2 different jobs. One of them wants to pay you 2 times as much as the other one, right? Well, I'm really drawn to that one. Like, let's just get rid of that other option. Like, of course. But in this case, it would be that you don't try to detach a bit from that and detach from any specific thing so that everything sort of feels equal and unbiased. The other thing that will happen as you go through this process is that you may discover other options that you didn't know you had when you start doing this unbiased analysis. And as you're discovering other options, or to make sure you have all your options before you, these are the questions that really help out. What's the problem or situation I am dealing with here? What are all of the opportunities? Who are all the people involved? What is option C, option D, option Q? This helps you get your options all on the floor before you. And the goal, once you've got all this data again and all your options before you, as I was saying, is to have this sort of unbiased look, right? But in the Ignatian way of discernment, this is called indifference. You really want to obtain a place of indifference. And I'd like to take a moment just to talk about indifference, because actually it's a real important place of Ignatian discernment. It basically allows the individual to relate to all things with a freedom to only choose that which helps them serve God. And I wanted to share with you this thing called the principle and foundation that Ignatius of Loyola had created to go with the exercises for basically figuring all this discernment stuff out. And I'm just going to want to read it to you because I think it's profound. God created human beings to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by doing this, to save their souls. God created all other things on the face of the earth to help fulfill this purpose. From this it follows that we are to use the things of this world only to the extent that they help us to this end. And we ought to rid ourselves of the things of this world to the extent that they get in the way of this end. For this, it is necessary to make ourselves indifferent to all created things as much as we are able, so that we do not necessarily want health rather than sickness, riches rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, a long rather than a short life, and so in all the rest, so that we ultimately desire and choose only what is most conducive for us to the end for which God created us. And when I first read this for the first time ever years ago, I was just really blown away by the straightforwardness of it, general simplicity of it, and the way it really helped encompass a healthy relationship with God and all of the things in creation. And I've really appreciated that. And so in terms of, again, collecting data, in terms of looking at all your options, this is a bit what like indifference looks like. And so that you're not necessarily pulled into any one particular direction, because in the end, those things are there to help you serve God. The other amazing thing that it does, actually, in these circumstances, if you can imagine if you have all these options and all this data, and you're not actually being pulled or attached to any one specific one, your options just increased. They're all options. Mm-hmm. And that's the really cool thing. There's like freedom. Mm-hmm. It's possible that any of these and all of these are actually good. And that leads us into the next phase. Dreaming the dreams and tapping into our desires. So I know that Ignatius, right, he's holding us, he wants us to be indifferent, to become detached. But he also intended that we don't give up our personal desires. He really wanted us to pursue those desires. And it actually was contrary to what many of his peers held to that day. He just had this radical notion for his day that God dwells within our desires, and that the soul is where God's desires and your desires intersect. And that was the perspective that he had. And so desires are not to be ignored in this process. So when you're in this stage of dreaming the dreams, it's important that when you look at your options, right, and we detach from them, that you're asking God to come in and dream with you and see how far you can go into the possibilities of it. Ignatius was really big on this because he had to kind of seem to have a big imagination. And so, he was stuck in an infirmary for a year because he was really hurt. And he was reading Gospels because there was nothing else there to read. And so the story is that as he's reading them, he wanted to be a knight before this, right? And like he had visions of, womenizing and becoming a knight and all that sort of stuff. So when he's sitting there reading these stories, he just can't help but dream. So then he starts dreaming about being a great saint and being like this amazing thing for God and all these things. And so that's why this comes in to this Ignatian discernment, to dream big with God and to not ignore your passions and to actually include them and have them be a part of what's happening. And so all of those options now are set before you in such a way where now you can engage with them with your passions and desires. And at this moment, I wanted to bring us back to the Lectio, a portion of the Lectio from last week, which I think all of this coincides really well with what we read. So it's in 1 Corinthians, things never discovered or heard of before, the things beyond our ability to imagine. These are the many things God has in store for all his lovers. But it was to us that God revealed these things by his Spirit. For his Spirit searches out everything and shows us God's deep secrets. No one can know a person's thoughts except that person's own spirit, and no one can know God's thoughts except God's own Spirit. And we have received God's Spirit, not the world's spirit, so we can know the wonderful things God has freely given us. And I think that really captures sort of the spirit, again, of dreaming the dreams of these possibilities with God. You can also see, too, that we're using that first phase of getting quiet when we're doing that repeatedly so that we're building that relationship up, right? So that we're trusting that God really loves us and accepts us and wants to be around us with bruises and all. So that when we come to this point and he's dreaming with us, it's big and it's wonderful and it's exciting and it's fun and it's joyful and it's passionate. And it also strikes me too that this way of discerning a situation is very different than the world or how I would do it. I'm naturally very pessimistic. I get angry. And so if I got options, I'm gonna chop them down. I'm gonna go, that one stinks, that's more money, get rid of that, and all this, and so I'm just whittled down to this little thing, is this high? And then I go, that's the best one because it doesn't suck as much as the others or something. But this other way is like kind of mind-blowing. Wait a second. Make myself indifferent so that there's a million possibilities. Invite God and see all the dreams. Let them all be equal. And then what? What happens next? Because I can't do them all. Well, that leads us into the next step. But it's fantastic getting here, I have to say, and very different than a journey I've ever been on. All right, so I'll go on to the next step. Got these amazing things happening with God. Uh-oh, I gotta think about them. All right, let's think about those. So really, the discernment process on the dreams is filtered through some questions that you're really asking yourself. And I know I already jumped to the slide, but here you are. Which dreams leave me feeling closer to God? All right. In Ignatian parlance, that's called consolation. I'm close, so it's consoling. Which leave me without a sense of closeness? So now I'm far away, right? Which dreams leave me filled with faith, hope, and love? Close. Which of these dreams leave me dry and sad? You kind of get a sense of this, right? You can create your own questions that really tease out what dreams are working for you. Which dreams are drawing you into a greater, more intimate relationship with Jesus that's including your desires and fulfilling your purpose to serve him? So if you don't feel like one of these is working, like this dream isn't, I don't feel that close to Jesus, it might not be a great choice, or one of my really just God-given desires isn't being fulfilled with this one, then you might want to not pursue it. And the same goes with living out your purpose. Ignatius would say this about arriving at a final decision on these things, and I think it also too was very profound. Yes, I just said that. The love that moves and causes one to choose must descend from above, that is, from the love of God, so that before one chooses, he should perceive that the greater or less attachment for the object of his choice is solely because of his Creator and Lord. I know the parlance is a little bit different than contemporary language, but when we're putting this together, you can see that what you're doing is you're always coming back to your intimate relationship with Jesus, right? That's really what he's saying. Not only are you to serve Jesus, but you're to remain in an intimate place, in an intimate setting with him. That's really the message that I really feel that God has for us in these things. I just feel like God is saying that in the end it's intimacy with Christ, and that he wants to be with you, and he wants to dream with you. And in that space, I just really feel like it's saying to you that there are no bad choices. In that space, there really are no bad choices. And maybe some of you have come here tonight with just feeling like you've made some. And that maybe it makes it hard to want to be in the room with him for long periods of time. Or maybe you felt like you misheard him. And it felt like you don't maybe trust the same voice anymore to speak to you and to guide you. I'd just like to say it's okay. It's okay, and that the decisions that you make going forward, even if all this discernment stuff doesn't work, it's okay. God's grace and love and care goes before us in all things. And that's really what I felt like I wanted to share and to have coming from the monastery experience I was having as well. Funny enough, I actually don't have anything else. I thought that I had something even longer than this. But that's okay.
Let's make a decision with you.
That's okay. I probably could have put an exercise or something of discernment in here, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make some time of silence for us, okay? And we do have some extra time, so I'm going to hold it for a little bit. I'm going to go for 5 minutes or maybe a little bit more. And then after that, I'll invite Marion up to start just playing some music, and maybe we can head into some ministry time as well. Does that sound okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm just going to open that up now. Lord, I just invite you here into this silence, Lord. I just ask you, Father, to make this an invitation to you, to just be with you, and to feel your love and your grace on each of us right now.